welcome as part of this Bring It On Summit, where we're going to be looking at reinventing live and the always-on future of events. Now, this has taken on a little bit more prominence in the last 2 hours, given that recently NAB announced that the 2021 show was cancelled. So we are going to look at different ways of, hybrid and everything like that, how you can measure ROI and the differences between in-person and virtual events. So I'd like to welcome Marco Giberti for this session. So Marco is a successful entrepreneur and investor with more than 25 years of intensive experience as co-founder and CEO in media, technology, and the events industry companies. So perfectly placed for this discussion today. So Marco, let's make a start let's look at the hybrid world rather than hybrid events. You did a blog post recently talking about, it's entitled Forget Hybrid Events, It's About a Hybrid World. Can you talk us through this and what it actually means? And I will share the blog post as well at the end with the audience.
Sure. Well, the whole concept is pretty simple. Event organizers are debating about hybrid for the last couple of years, and hybrid is around for the last couple of decades in some capacity. But I think that what COVID is showing is that it's not hybrid events, it's a hybrid world approach. And if you see what big tech companies like Microsoft, Apple, Google, you name it, are doing, is adjusting their software capabilities and offering into a hybrid world opportunity that will include remote working, education, telemedicine, and many massive industries moving into a different concept. And if you think that events are going to be isolated, I think that you're missing the point, because events are going to be affected from all those massive technologies, and also, more important, from the customer mindset. I want to say customer is the visitor, the delegate, or the exhibitor, the seller, or the venue, speakers. Every single stakeholder is going to be rethinking the way that they're going to be interacting with live events. And the other thing that I believe that we learned during the last couple of year and a half, is what is strictly necessary to execute face-to-face, and what could and should be done on a digital way in order to be more efficient, scalable, and productive. And I remember thinking about this concept like a year ago when we started thinking about our book, Reinventing Live. And the whole idea was that we need face-to-face for almost everything related to B2B events. But right now I changed quite a lot because I realized that many digital interactions could and should be very productive and save time and money, which means I think that mindset is very relevant on all stakeholders. And if you're an event organizer or exhibitor sponsor, you have to rethink the way that you want to interact and you want to extract ROI from your investment.
And so, Marco, what do you think some of the challenges people are going to face with those? Because, I mean, if they're at an in-person event and they still want to have a digital presence, or if they want to stream and interact with audiences, how can people overcome some of the challenges around that?
Well, we can probably spend a couple of days talking about challenges because challenges are coming in different waves during these days. And challenges are related to, as I said before, customer mindset, engagement. And if you split the world on a simple way and you have the event technology solutions and the event organizers, challenges between communication between both of them is still a massive problem. And don't forget, at a live event, it's a partnership between all these stakeholders, which means all these stakeholders should be engaged and aligned in terms of engaging technology, the way that they're going to meet, the way that they're going to network or educate, et cetera, et cetera. And the reality is that we're growing faster than ever in terms of technology engagement and adoption. And also, I see a couple of decades of progress and innovation happening in a couple of years around live events, which is very exciting. I started investing on event technology 10 years ago, and I was always frustrated with pace of change and speed. And during the last couple of years, it's fantastic because every single organizer needs to understand the way to engage with event technology, and everyone is looking to learn and try and experiment with event technology and keep accelerating innovation. And also, is going to bring a tremendous amount of capital into event technology. If you see what's happening with many of these event technology companies, they are raising hundreds of millions of dollars. They have unicorn valuations, and that capital will continue to come to the space because now finally private equity and venture capital realize that live events are ready for prime time in terms of engaging digital.
Do you think maybe event technology roadmaps have changed quite a bit since the pandemic came along, where maybe they were looking at things like passive scanning and stuff like that, to now it's much more aligned to provide that hybrid solution?
It's a great point. If you think event technology, as I said before, is not new. It's a couple of decades plus old, and it was always about 2 or 3 categories. Now we have 25 plus event tech categories that you can track if you are an organizer or investor. And also there's a massive consolidation because during COVID, everyone do some sort of pivot into an event, virtual event platform. I heard from the Virtual Events Institute, actually in London, that there are more than 600 event technology platforms, which is a crazy number, intimidating number, because all those 600 virtual event technology platforms are pitching organizers on a daily basis, and organizers are confused. And everyone in some place is competing with everyone, but on the other side, if you're a good and sophisticated event organizer, you want to be sure that you're using best in class in each of the critical categories. And honestly, if your show is about education, there are only 2 or 3 best in class solutions. If your show is about matchmaking and networking, there are probably a couple real solutions that you should analyze. And some of these event tech platforms are pitching the world saying you can do everything with us. And it's probably true in some small events, but the more sophisticated that is the audience, the community, and the event, the more deeper tech analysis into best in class should be done.
Okay, and so Marco, let's look at budgets. And I'm going to park the fact that NAB 2021 is not happening now and imagine that it is still happening. And so many people on this call would have been, in 2020, they had a budget to attend a trade show. That trade show was cancelled, so they allocated the majority of that budget to doing a digital presence during that time. When trade shows are back, how do you think companies should divide their budget? Because obviously everyone isn't going to suddenly get 2 budgets. They're not going to get a digital budget. Some people might do, but they're not going to get a digital budget and an in-person budget. How can they work out how to get the best value by where they allocate their budget with each of those 2 elements?
First of all, I don't have a crystal ball. I wish that I could tell you this is what's going to happen because I can make a ton of money investing in some specific companies and stocks. What I can share is some lessons learned from the book research and also some common sense analysis from a guy like me that spent 20 plus years organizing events and 10 plus years investing in event tech and marketing tech solutions and education tech solutions. NPS in the events industry was pretty depressive, low, and ugly before COVID. Even with a very low NPS, the industry was amazing, and trade show organizers were growing double digit, having 40% EBITDA, and life was beautiful. And I was always thinking, as one of those guys, why? NPS is low, we're making a ton of money, we're growing, margins are fat and beautiful. What's wrong in that particular disconnection between not very excited stakeholders and a pretty good business? The reality is that because of that, most organizers, association organizers and for-profit organizers, their level of pressure in terms of engage innovation and technology was pretty low because life was beautiful and the model was working pretty well. But on the other side, exhibitors, which is probably most of your audience, they were not super happy with the way that they could analyze return of investment or the way that they could interact with that audience more than 2 or 3 days, investing a ton of money and time going into a trade show. What's happening right now, and which is the challenge and opportunity for the next 5 to 10 years, is that probably your audience, which is the marketing owner of that particular budget, is rethinking how he or she is going to allocate that budget in a way that is going to maximize ROI and hopefully maximize engagement in more than 3 days. And that's a big part of our book and thesis is We don't think that it's going to be about 3 or 4 days. We think that it's going to be about a 365 engagement that is going to include digital activations and face-to-face activations. So we're going to see smaller, more regional shows growing faster than ever before, and those massive global shows probably flat or declining because we're going to see a different level of connection buyer-seller from a different angle, where digital is going to be critical. And your marketing audience is going to realize that digital could be extremely interesting from a return of investment perspective, but also extremely challenging and frustrating in terms of what I call prime time, which is the real face-to-face connection, the real meeting where the magic happens.
Yes, I wanted to touch on something you mentioned there, actually, which is around, the title of this session is the always-on future of events. So, an event previously would, let's say, take 4 days, and you would have the kind of run up to it, and then you'd have those 4 days where you could, condense the ability to get leads, to make sales and everything. Do you think that big events should have you mentioned 365 there. Do you think big events should have an always-on type of platform, or do you think if every event does that, it dilutes the other ones, and that there should be one central kind of platform for communication around this? Or what are the kind of timeframes you think events should? Again, it's crystal ball gazing for you, but
look, in some ways about brand permission, and most event organizers, they don't have brand permission from their audiences in order to have a 365 approach. Because if you go to show X, you think, I'm going to show X November 1st to November 3rd, and I'm out of there, and I will unplug that brand and that engagement. And that's a challenge for the traditional event organizers, that they were building their businesses on a 3 or 4 days model. See you there, tons of meetings, and the classic banner, we'll see you next year, which is a tragedy, basically, because it's basically telling your audience, okay, get out of here, I'll see you in a year. And many different things and a lot of marketing opportunities could and should be happening during that year. But you're right, if every single trade show organizer builds their 365 platform, it's going to be a super crowded space. And I think that that's going to be the case, and winners will be those who are able to create content and engagement opportunities. And again, depending on your industry and your show, it could be education or matchmaking, networking, or commerce, on a way that they're helping that audience to be more efficient, and also generate trust and brand permission for that particular company, that brand, in order to see, okay, this is more than a trade show or a conference. This is a community where I can really trust that community and participate, add value to that community, and extract value from different angles. I believe that traditional events organizers are gonna have a massive talent crisis, because they're mostly logistics operations sort of companies selling real estate space and attracting people through marketing people. And they will need to move into a completely different relationship with their customers. But the exciting part is that we're going to see a new generation of event organizers, which are really not event organizers. They're coming from a different world, and they're creating products where events are part of the value proposition, but it's not core and centric. It's just another activation and marketing opportunity. And those organizers, new or old, I believe that they're going to see an amazing opportunity during the next decade, because marketing budgets are going to be ready for that.
Yeah, I think it's about changing mindsets. I mean, I think if a traditional trade show organizer just stays focused on that way of doing things, then I think they run the very real risk of being left behind, don't they?
Yes, and it's easy to say, it's very difficult to execute. I was joking with a good friend earlier today. I'm so glad that I'm no longer running P&L for trade shows, because it's a tough time. And you will need to reinvent your business in a way that is pretty dramatic in comparison with what we saw in the past.
Mm-hmm. And so what are finally some of the top tips that you think you can give some of our audience, Marco, that they can take away with them?
The first one, if you see on the other side from the Mac, you will see Darth Vader and the Mandalorian helmets over there. For those of you who are Star Wars fans, there is one episode where Yoda is training Luke Skywalker on becoming a Jedi, and he says, You have to unlearn and learn again. And I keep using that phrase with event organizers, because honestly, if a guy like me who's around for 20, 30 years in the industry thinks that he learns something, it's wrong. I think that we need to be humble enough in order to unlearn what we learn and learn again from a completely different value proposition. And it's tough because life was comfortable and super profitable and it works, but now we need to learn a different way. That's first tip, honestly. If you want to be around this industry and be relevant, I think that you should engage change on a real way and not just on a cool phrase. Two, I think that if you're organizing events, you will need to rethink the way that you will engage that community, as I said before, and the way that you're going to monetize. If you need to make some profits with your events and it's not just a marketing investment, it's going to change dramatically. And if you're exhibiting in events, in your own events or third-party events, I think that you have a massive opportunity to generate efficiencies with technology that is going to help you to engage your audience before, maximize the face-to-face opportunity, and keep the conversation open after that particular event. And that's the 365 model. I call it leads as a service, which is a model where you can generate leads as a software as a service year long. And that's where the real opportunity from my perspective could and should be during the next decade, because it's going to be way more efficient. It's going to be very, very transparent and easy to measure from a marketing perspective. I keep joking with the Google generation frustrated with live events, because the Google marketing generation, they can measure everything super fast and easy, and they go to live events and they're always frustrated about how difficult it is to measure that. That problem needs to be fixed. And there are at least 3 or 4 event tech companies working on that issue. I welcome everyone who's trying to build ROI software solutions for measuring live events, because live events is a super powerful tool and should be growing, because the human connection is not going away. We're not going to replace face-to-face with these meetings. This could be a nice way to watch a little bit of content, spark a couple of ideas, potentially have a one-to-one meeting after this if someone is interested in one topic. But let's be honest, trust is built face-to-face. Mm-hmm. And that face-to-face connection will be, from my perspective, as valid as it was before COVID, and more productive if we do our job from every single stakeholder, as I mentioned before.
Excellent. Okay, well, Marco, we're coming up to 1 minute before the session ends. So I have shared your blog with everybody in the chat. So I'd urge people to go and have a look at that. The next session taking place is called Life's a Pitch with Lee Warren. So if you head to the live sessions. But Marco, thank you for joining us today. It's been really interesting talking with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.